Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the AAS YouTube channel. And this is part of the awesome stuff, the most good stuff. And I am super happy to have Kelly Douglas with us today. Hi, Kelly.
Hello, it's great to be here.
It's great for you to be talking about your article. It's lovely. Very cool. And Kelly, where are you located at?
I'm currently in Rochester, New York.
Rochester, New York. We are a little past equinox on March 23rd as we record this. And is spring in the air in Rochester, or are we still snowy?
It's definitely warming up here. Yeah, it's actually raining today, not snowing, and there's very little snow left on the ground. So yeah, I think we might have an early spring.
That would be great. I'm in Phoenix, and amazingly enough, in the last 3 days, we got a little reminder that winter is still with us. So we were pretty cool for Phoenix. So hopefully in this next week, we'll actually get into spring. And
There you go.
Very cool. And Kelly, what do you like to do for research?
So I am an extragalactic astronomer, and I make giant maps of the universe and then try to find the empty regions in the universe. Yep. And study the properties of the galaxies that live in those least dense areas.
Ooh, yes, right. Very cool. And that is going to bring us to this most awesome APJ supplement article. It's open access, people. You can go get a copy for free. Go grab one. Updated void catalogs of the SDSS DR7 main sample. And Kelly, take us away.
Great. So yeah, this is work that we've been working on over the last couple of years. So this was done by myself, one of my colleagues, Professor Segya Bensby here at the University of Rochester, and then our graduate student, Dahlia Bayrit.
Very nice. Good shout out.
Yes, yes. And so, yeah, so what we were working on is basically after reconstructing and improving a number of different popular void finding algorithms that exist, we wanted to rerun these on existing galaxy catalogs that have been used over the last decade or so for large-scale studies. And so this is our kind of republication of those updated void catalogs.
Cool. Very nice.
So we've, like I said, there's a couple of different void finding algorithms we've used. And we just kind of consistently ran all the different algorithms on the same galaxies with the same selection effects and all of that good stuff to make a really consistent sample that the community can use to compare and contrast the different algorithm results and kind of run the same, do the same science on in a much more consistent manner than what has been done in the past.
Nice, nice. Okay.
So a little bit of background, because most people probably aren't familiar with voids. So yeah, so in the early, or I should say mid to late 70s is when the first galaxy redshift surveys were conducted, and it was discovered that galaxies are not distributed uniformly in space, but rather are kind of clustered together into these kind of knots, and those knots are stringed together via filaments, and they surround these really large, underdense regions of that we call voids. The best kind of analogy to think about it, a lot of people refer to it as a cosmic web, so like a three-dimensional spider web. I like to think about it as a sponge. So the galaxies are the sponge material, and you have kind of the holes embedded within that material.
Nice.
Swiss cheese, for those of you who enjoy food. Yep, that's another great analogy as well.
Very good. I like that analogy. Very good.
And so the main idea is when you're looking at these early redshift surveys, it's pretty easy by eye to pick out the voids, the underdense regions. But as we grew in our galaxy redshift surveys, we needed to develop algorithms to be able to find these voids, because it was no longer possible to do it on a case-by-case basis, if you will.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so that's where these void finding algorithms come into play here. And so there's been a couple of different algorithms that have been developed over the years. We have two main ones that we use here in this paper. We use Void Finder and what we're calling Voronoi voids, or V squared, which is a re-implementation of the Zobab algorithm originally developed by Mark Nyrink back in 2008.
Okay.
And so both of them are doing the same thing at the end of the day. They're finding those underdense regions, but they find them very differently.
Right.
Void Finder essentially grows empty spheres in the galaxy distribution.
Okay.
And then merges those spheres together to form the voids. So you end up with each void kind of looks like a almost like a brain structure. You have one main sphere and then a bunch of smaller ones that kind of fill in the detailed volume of that void.
Okay. Okay.
Voronoi voids, on the other hand, is a watershed-based algorithm based on a 3D Voronoi tessellation of the galaxies.
Mm-hmm.
So every single galaxy, you define its Voronoi cell, which is the largest volume that you can fit one of those galaxies in without overlapping any other galaxies in the distribution.
I'm with you. Mm-hmm.
And then the volume of that Voronoi cell is more or less inversely proportional to the local density of that galaxy. So the less dense the environment is there, the larger that volume cell is going to be.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
So what the way this algorithm works then is it kind of uses those cells as a topology. And you start with the largest volume cell and you start filling up kind of a water level from that largest cell or that deepest potential. And you fill it up and slowly flow in until you reach points where you have a wall in between the two of them and the algorithm stops.
Got it. Very nice. That was a good description. Okay.
So thank you. So you can kind of imagine, right? You can tune how far up or down you want to fill everything, and that determines which areas are the voids. The voids are going to be what's underwater, if you will.
Yep.
And so there's been different ways of doing that, what's called void pruning, in the literature over the years since the original algorithm was developed. And what we did with Voronoi voids is, or V squared is our shortcut for that, is we kind of took all of those different pruning steps and we lumped them all into one in the final step of the algorithm. So we have the same code that runs up to that final pruning step, and then you get to choose which, how you want to define your final voids based on that filling fraction.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so one of the ways you can do it is by defining an effective radius for the voids. So calculating the total volume of the void and then computing, if that was a sphere, what would be the effective radius of that sphere? What would be the radius that gives you a sphere with that volume?
Okay, I'm with you. Mm-hmm.
We can compute the same effective radius for the Void Finder voids as well.
Right.
Following that same analogy. So we'll be using R effective throughout the rest of this paper as kind of a filter, or you'll see it in the various plots.
Okay.
So those are the different algorithms that we used, and we ran all of these algorithms on SDSS DR7, the main galaxy sample. Mm-hmm. So this is a rather old galaxy redshift survey at this point. It was finished back in the late 2000s, so about 2008, 2009. I know, so long ago. But the reason we used it is because it is still the most complete deep galaxy survey to date. Right. The later data releases of SDSS, which now goes out to, I believe, DR17, mm-hmm. They expand to deeper redshifts, but the sampling density of the galaxies is much less than what it was in this original survey. And in doing that, you naturally are going to find much larger voids because you're not tracing that large scale structure quite with the same detail that this original sample did.
Okay.
And so DR7 is still used a lot in the literature for for galaxy studies, galaxy evolution, and whatnot. So we found it was important to kind of update and provide the community with with those uniform void catalogs so that we can actually do better science, if you will, than what has been done in the
Yep, I'm with you. Yep.
And so with doing that, I think figure 1 is kind of a slice plot through a part of the survey, showing the intersection of the voids in each catalog with that that particular slice of the sky.
Okay.
So we have void finder up at the top.
Yep.
We have V squared with V pruning in the middle, and then we have V squared with revolver pruning in the bottom. And so in each one of these figures, you'll see a couple of different colors. First of all, the black and red dots, those correspond to the galaxies.
Okay.
The black galaxies are what we call wall galaxies. Those are the ones that are not in the voids.
Yeah.
So everything else, right? And then we have the void galaxies. Those are the red ones, and those are the ones that do end up falling inside a void using any of the different 3 algorithms.
Which is below
so,
red ones. Yep.
Yeah, so you can see a couple of the red ones in void finder right there. And then the kind of spherical things, yeah, the blobby stuff. What's in blue are the voids that are well within the survey boundaries.
Okay.
And so those are the void regions here, and you can kind of see what I was talking about, that like lumpy but merge or union of those spheres.
Yeah.
And then what's kind of in gold along the boundary, those are what we're calling boundary voids.
Okay.
So those are voids that are intersecting with the edge of the survey volume, and therefore might not be the most accurate because we can't constrain
the other
exactly what those voids are right on the other side.
Right. Okay.
So depending on your studies, you may want to include those or you may not want to include those. And so in the void catalogs, we have flagged those that live on the boundaries in case you want to remove them from your final sample.
Cool. Okay, good.
So that was kind of our main result with this paper. And beyond that, we did some comparisons between the different catalogs, because one of the questions we had going into this was how do the different void catalogs compare? If you have, different algorithms that are finding these underdense regions, do they find the same underdense regions?
Yes.
Or do they, find different areas?
Yeah.
And so that's really what we were looking for here. And so just visually looking at this first figure and looking at the comparison, you can see that, there's some overlap between the areas, but there's also, for example, in the V squared V pruning, there are some regions that aren't identified as voids, but clearly look like they're very empty. They don't have a lot of galaxies in those regions.
Yeah, for example, this one right here.
Exactly.
Or this one here, right?
Or that one there, yeah.
Okay.
So we wanted to try and quantify that a little bit better. And so I don't remember which one of the tables, but it's one of the next tables that we have in the paper. So all these early tables are just examples of the catalogs that we provide. So
it's not the full deal, people, right?
Exactly, yes. This is not the full thing. Void Finder has about 1,100 voids in it.
Okay.
V squared is about 500 or so voids in total.
Yeah, and you can kind of get that sense just in the picture there that there's more or less in different ones. Okay.
Yes, yeah. So the V squared ones are much larger than the Void Finder ones.
Okay.
Yeah. So keep going. It might be table 6. Yes, table 6.
Yes, there we go. Okay.
All right. So table 6 is where we tried to compare and contrast the different void catalogs to see how they compared to each other. And we ended up running this on 2 different cosmologies because we did also do the same comparisons on a set of simulations. And the simulations were created with the WMAP5 cosmology. So we figured we should also do WMAP5 for the data, but also the more updated Planck 2018 cosmology.
Nice. Okay.
And so this is actually really great that we have this figure on the same screen here, because the figure really helps to explain what the comparisons are. Okay. So the figure here, figure 3, is showing the overlap in the same volume of the survey between voids that are found with Void Finder, which are shown in blue, and voids that are found with V squared, and I think this was with V pruning, which are shown in the red, exactly.
Yeah.
And so this is really illustrative because it shows how Void Finder breaks up the void regions into what we call dynamically distinct voids. So these are voids that would have evolved separately from the other void areas. So over time, the expansion of the universe, the voids were kind of emptying and expanding outwards. You had two spots that were expanding next to each other, and they've kind of now run into each other exactly.
Right.
But it's important for some area, you know, some science to kind of keep those isolated.
Yes.
And then V squared, you can see kind of lumps all of that together and really includes galaxies in the dense regions as part of the voids as well. So like on the right-hand side of this figure, you can see a really dense wall of galaxies that V squared is saying is part of a void. And that has to do with how V squared works. It kind of flows that watershed up to and includes those wall regions because it'll fill up until it runs into another void and then it'll stop. And so it kind of chops the walls in half and says, well, one half of you is part of this void and the other half is part of the other void.
Got it. Okay.
So what we ended up computing is kind of the overlap fraction between the different void catalogs. And so that's what's contained in this table here, table 6, is how much of the volume of the survey is contained within Void Finder voids, V squared with VEED or V squared with revolver pruning.
Wow.
And so you can see it's about 60% in Void Finder, about 65 to 68% in VEED, and almost 90% of the survey volume is considered a void by using revolver pruning.
Wow, it's quite a difference there.
Yes, yeah, it is quite a difference. And then if you look in the right-hand column, it shows you what the fraction of galaxies are that are contained within voids. So voids, in general, we expect to be very underdense. So a small fraction of the galaxies should exist in the voids. And you see a very drastic difference here, even more so than the survey volume. Void Finder finds about 18% of the galaxies live in the voids, all the way up to V squared with revolver pruning, where you find over 80% of the galaxies are considered void galaxies, which is just crazy.
Begs the definition of a void.
Exactly. And so this table kind of gives the statistics of, you know, what we find in each one of the void catalogs. And then I think table 7, that one is going to give us the overlap fraction between the different void catalogs.
Ah, very good. Very good.
Yeah, so here we've taken, you know, volume that is considered a void in Void Finder, volume that is considered a void with V squared VEED or revolver, and then a comparison between VEED and revolver. How much did both of them say was a void? And then how many galaxies did both of them consider void galaxies?
Okay.
And so you can see the numbers are very different. So for example, only 41% of the survey volume did both Void Finder and V squared consider both a void. So if you compare that to the values from table 6, we had 60% of the total survey volume Void Finder considered a void.
Right.
So the difference between these two, that roughly 20%, says that there's 20% of the volume that Void Finder thought was a void that V squared with VEED pruning says is not a void.
Right. Okay.
Exactly.
I'm with you.
And so you can do that comparison with, you know, each one of these to see how much did each one, how much overlap or similarity did they have versus not. And then one of the last things that we did is to look at what the void profiles were in terms of density for the different for the different algorithms, to see how they compared in just kind of their profiles of the voids. Do they all find the same underdensity in the center and overdensity on the edge?
It's an interesting question. Okay.
Yeah, and so what we're basically doing is comparing the, right, as equation 5 shows, we're comparing the average density of the survey to the density at some given radius of galaxies within the actual void itself. And so that's what we're considering to be the density.
Okay.
So I think if we go to the next figure, we'll see the first distribution of this. So what we're looking at here is, as a function of radius, what is the relative density of the voids? And these are unnormalized, so this is just raw as a function of radius. If you put all of the void centers and overlapped each other and then stacked them all together and counted what's the density as I move my way outwards in the radial direction, that's what you're looking at here.
Good.
And we have each one of the three algorithms. And you can see they all roughly look the same. And what we would expect for a void, you have a very underdense region in the center. It quickly rises when you get to the edge of the void. You get a little bit of a peak right at the edge because you have an overdensity, because all of the material that was in the void was getting kind of expanded into that wall region. So you have a slight overdensity at the wall relative to the average density of the universe.
That makes sense. Okay. Yeah.
The only problem with doing the stacking this way, though, is you're kind of, because all the voids are different sizes, you're kind of smooshing out that wall feature and kind of blurring it across the small voids to the big voids.
Big ones, yeah. Okay.
So in figure 6, we normalize these radii to the effective void radius. So we said we're going to, for each void, we're going to calculate it as a function of the center of that void out to that normalized effective radius, and that's going to be at 1. So now we've put the edges of all the voids at the same location in this figure.
Right, right. Okay.
And here you really see a drastic difference between the voids found with Void Finder and those found with the V-squared algorithm.
Indeed.
So Void Finder is very flat on the inside, and then it sharply rises right at the wall and goes out. The V-squared voids, independent of which pruning method you use, they both slowly, gradually increase in that density.
Yeah.
And we think that's really because of that watershed algorithm and how it kind of fills and flows together as you get closer and closer to those wall regions, but you're including those wall galaxies as part of the void volume, as opposed to Void Finder, which by design goes out to but stops before those wall galaxies. And so you're not actually including them as part of the void volume.
Got it.
So at the end of the day, it turns out that these algorithms are defining different areas or different parts of the large scale structure as a void. Void Finder is saying the interior part of the void, what has dynamically been very different than the rest of the universe, because matter has only been moving out away from the center. That is what it calls the void, and it doesn't include that kind of area at the boundary where the material has been kind of crossing over itself as it's piling up on the edge. Whereas V-squared, it includes that pile up as part of the void and says that that is actually part of the void volume.
Right. And depending on the science one is doing, I mean, there's not necessarily a right answer here. There's just different answers, right?
Exactly.
So depending on the science one does, one may prefer Void Finder or V-squared, depending on what you're doing.
Yes, and it's really important that we did this study to show that you're exactly right. You need to be aware of what you're trying to do with the voids, and that should drive which algorithm you're trying to pick. So if if you're caring about looking at galaxy properties and looking at galaxies that evolved in a very different environment than other ones, Void Finder is the best one for you. If you care more about the shape or the size of the voids, and you don't care so much about what's inside them or where exactly those boundaries are, then V-squared will work completely fine for your analysis.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good. Awesome.
So I think that's all that I wanted to go through. This last figure is just a comparison between this void catalog of void finders and an earlier version of it that was run back in 2012.
Got it. Okay. Very good. This is an awesome piece of work. Congratulations.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun to work on.
I think it's very good. Very cool. All right. And Kelly, I want to thank you so much for walking us through your very lovely APJ sup article.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
And you touched on it a little bit as we went through, and so let me push on it a little bit, considering the history of this. And that's where do you think we go? Let's say over the next 2 to 5 years, are there additional algorithms to try that people are developing that may have different properties for the voids? Are there additional surveys planned either through SDSS or maybe some of the upcoming or current telescopes, things along those lines? So just sort of next steps, where do we go on this topic?
Yeah, great questions. So both sides of those, there's room for growth. On the algorithm side, we picked the 2 most popular algorithms that have been used in the last decade or so. But there are other algorithms out there that people are using and developing, that we can definitely add to and augment both the software package that we've put together that contain these algorithms, as well as other algorithms that are in development using things besides just this very geometric way of defining a void. So maybe kind of probing and getting at, what really is a void besides just this underdense region, what created it, what caused it, things like that. And then on the other side, for the actual survey part, like I mentioned, DR7 is a relatively old galaxy survey at this point, but it's the most complete one that we currently have.
Right.
That is being changed. So SDSS DR7 only goes out to redshift of 0.1. I'm currently part of the DESI collaboration, which is conducting the next generation version of SDSS.
Cool.
And so we'll have an equivalent galaxy catalog to the DR7 main sample from SDSS, but out to a redshift of 0.4. So we'll be going out 4 times as deep in redshift space. And that's just the most complete one. We also have other galaxy surveys that will be expanding out even further. So that'll give us new ways of not only finding these voids, but also looking at how the voids actually evolve in redshift.
Yes.
We'll just be able to observe that for the first time and whatnot. So yeah, we have a lot of exciting things over the next couple of years in this field.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I look forward to seeing all the new data come up and the new algorithms tried out. It's all very cool. It'll be good to see this field move forward over the next couple of years. Very nice.
Yes.
Cool. And that will do, everyone. And I hope this made your astronomy day just a little bit better. And we will see you on the next one. Bye-bye.